Okay, guys, we're going to jump right in to this interview with Medhi Hasan. He's interviewing a comedian and a political commentator, Dave Smith. Dave Smith is a libertarian, so kind of a non-interventionist. It's not a major political party. They're center right, so they're not all the way on the left. They don't hate Donald Trump, and they don't portray themselves as people who love Donald Trump. They're the fair-minded. America should not meddle in other people's affairs. We're doing our own thing. We want to be liberated from globalism and meddling in other people's affairs. That's kind of his frame and his mindset. And he's gotten quite popular as of late. He's been on some popular podcasts, Joe Rogan podcasts, a lot of these political YouTube shows and podcasts, being critical of Trump, being critical of what's happening in Gaza. But he voted for Donald Trump. So in this clip, Mehdi's going to ask him and press him a little bit on why he would vote for Donald Trump as an intelligent person. So we'll get into it and we'll comment.
I agreed with. This part I thought was horribly wrong. So yes, you're absolutely right. Donald Trump, this is what he does all the time. He walks you up to the cliff and then walks back and then wants credit for walking back from the cliff. So
Indeed.
I agree with you.
You've been pretty outspoken against Trump in recent days over Iran. As you say, you've called for his impeachment. But you voted for him. As recently as, 8 months ago? When was the election? November 2024. Why did you make that decision, and do you now regret it?
Yeah, I mean, I said the other day that I apologized for voting for him, but with a lot of these things, I just felt like he's making the worst possible decision right now. I'm going to criticize him in the harshest possible language and try to send as much of a message as I can that even people who did support Donald Trump will turn on him over this. And I was glad to see that many other people who supported Donald Trump also had similar messages. But I think that my calculation is, I've talked about this like extensively on my podcast, but my calculation of supporting Donald Trump, I think is kind of maybe the inverse or somewhat similar to your calculation in voting for Joe Biden or then Kamala Harris. It's like you would agree that they were funded.
Why do people keep calling her Kamala? She's not the Ugandan giant wrestler from old school WWF for all the wrestling fans. Why are they calling this is a distinguished titled woman. Why do they continue to mispronounce her name? This guy he's a comedian, he's on TV every day. Why can't he pronounce the former vice president's name correctly? It's really interesting. It's really interesting. And I bet if there was a candidate that he supported and their name got mispronounced, he would certainly call them out on it. But it's really infuriating. Why can't they? Kamala is not even a hard name.
A genocide for the last year plus of their administration. It's just the overall calculation. You think that, well, I think probably one of these two people are going to be president and this one will be preferable to the other one. So this has always been my biggest concern about Donald Trump, though, was some type of war with Iran. So whether I regret the vote, I tend to think like that was in the past. At the time, I thought it was the best decision.
Okay.
Looking back at it, who knows?
Putting aside the regrets, and you said you already apologized for it, so in a sense you are regretful. Let's just talk about the calculation you had, because I'm fascinated by Trump voters, and most Trump voters I meet are not as informed as yourself, I think it's fair to say. You're pretty well informed on the foreign policy agenda. We know that Donald Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal in 2018. You knew that. We know he assassinated top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in 2020. You knew that. Those two decisions are basically why we are where we are now. It's why Iran started enriching at 60%, not the 3.67% they were doing under Barack Obama's JCPOA deal. You went ahead and voted for Donald Trump last year, knowing that he is the guy who tore up the Iran deal. It's not like, this is not 2016. You didn't go in saying, well, maybe Donald Trump might be the guy. He's saying anti-war stuff in Michigan. He's attacking Liz Cheney. Yeah, he sounds like the more anti-war guy. He had a record that you, Dave Smith, were aware of. Killing Soleimani, tearing up the nuclear deal. So when he goes and becomes president and strikes Iran, that is on your hands too, right? You should have known that he was going to do that.
Well, I don't really agree with that any more than I think that if Kamala Harris had won and continued the policy, which she certainly would have, of funding Israel's destruction of Gaza, I don't think you would have had blood on your hands necessarily. The truth is that we live in a system where there are two major parties,
But I
and
made it
all the
very
other
clear,
parties have the
Dave, to
system
people
rigged
that I
against
didn't
them.
agree with Harris's Gaza policy and that she would be bad on Gaza. You went into
Yeah, but
Trump.
I was very clear.
No, you
was very
suggested
clear
Trump
that
would
I
be more anti-war, didn't you? Or am I wrong on that?
No. I mean, I said I always said going in, and I always was very clear on criticizing Trump for leaving the JCPOA and taking out Soleimani. I thought was a horrible decision that could have led to a catastrophe if not for Iranian restraint. But no, I was very clear on that, and I was very clear that the biggest concern with Donald Trump was Iran. I said from the very beginning that that was the thing that was going to make me turn on him if he went in that direction. And also, I always knew it was inevitable that Donald Trump would mess up and that I would turn on him and be criticizing him. I wish he hadn't. I will say this.
So his calculation, it seems like from this interview, his big issue with Kamala Harris is that she would have continued the policies of the war in Gaza. So he would have to think that Trump would stop those, which he hasn't, of course. What's happening in Gaza is still continuing to happen, no matter what deals are purported to be cut or what peace treaties are purported to be made. But he's saying, I knew Donald Trump would mess up. I knew Donald Trump broke the deal with Iran that Obama created to slow down their nuclear enrichment program. Trump tore that up and increased Iran's nuclear capabilities. I knew that he did that, and I knew that eventually he'd probably mess up anyway, but I still voted for him. How is this like that calculation? Mehdi's asking him for what his calculation is. He's essentially saying, I made a calculation and I knew I would fail, but I did it anyway.
Probably I held out a sliver of hope, and I always portrayed it this way, that because Netanyahu had double-crossed Donald Trump after he gave him everything he wanted in his first term, that maybe Trump would be petty and vindictive enough to not want to give him everything he wanted in his second term. And maybe the fact that there were voices like Tulsi and some of these other people who were a little bit better, maybe we'd see something better. But I always knew that he was going to end up disappointing.
Let's talk about Gaza for a moment.
So let's talk about that for a second. Again, he reiterated, I knew that he was going to end up disappointing, but you voted for him anyway. And he didn't, at least in this interview, didn't articulate what was so horrible about Kamala Harris that he would rather vote for the person who he knew was going to disappoint him on the issues that he cared about the most. He said he held out a sliver of hope that Trump would be petty. So he's basing his vote on the hopes that Donald Trump would be petty with Benjamin Netanyahu. I think, and I want y'all to leave in the comments, why do you think that he wouldn't vote for Kamala Harris? I think, and I think it's quite clear, especially with these libertarian folks who, again, tend to be center-right, racism and misogyny. It's pretty clear. He can't choose Trump for anything moral or for public speaking or for intelligence or for history or for background. He can't choose Trump for that. So again, he chooses Trump for his purported anti-war stance, which he knew Trump would fail at anyway. The fact that he can't even pronounce her name shows that he has that only a modicum of respect for the former vice president. So of course he wouldn't vote for her. It's an underlying, and it's bubbling up to the surface more and more. It's an underlying racism and misogyny that we have in this country. And he gets to kind of smile and say, well, I thought, that Trump was going to be petty. And he makes this kind of political blunder in the sense that you ask him, why is he making his political vote? And he says, well, I'm basing it on this calculation, even though I know the calculation is going to fail. And people still look at him and turn to him for political advice and want insight on things. When he's clearly explained, I make political calculations, I know they're going to fail. And I'm just like, well, and he gets to smile about it. It's really, really interesting. And of course, if we're going to do the whataboutism, if the shoe was reversed, he would criticize people who did this. He would criticize people whose political calculations self-admittedly will fail. It's really insane if you really think about it. So anyway, guys, comment, share the video. This is a short one today, but yeah, political commentator, comedian, a popular YouTuber, Dave Smith says he voted for Donald Trump even though I knew he was going to disappoint me. And but he just couldn't vote for Kamala, the Ugandan giant. All right, guys, share, like, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.